Welcome everybody, I'm John Wally, and today we're going further in our series for deploying and installing Tenable OT security. And we're going to be doing a separate episode where we start talking about can we generate some traffic that we'd normally see in an industrial control system for those of you that are running this in a lab and you're not in production. That way we can work further on tuning and optimizing when we have real data. So let's go ahead and jump in. So the first thing we want to do is log into our sensor. So in our previous episodes, we've been able to set up our core appliance, we've set up our sensors, we've done some initial setups. Now we want to actually log into the back end of our sensor. So I'm going to go over to our sensor and I'm going to log in here with the original account that we set up. All right, and there's a few things that we need to do on the sensor to make sure that we have the capabilities we need to properly kind of replay traffic and get some of that industrial traffic coming in. Now, before we do anything else, you may notice in updates that you have a little exclamation point down here. If you don't, that's fine. But anytime you're installing new packages on a Linux system, it's recommended that we do an update. So we're going to go in and we're going to say sudo. Now, sudo is a way of saying that we want to run the application as an administrator or as root. So we're going to do a sudo, and then we're going to say yum, which is our package manager, and we're just going to say update. And this will make sure that all of our packages are up to date before we start trying to install new stuff that's out there. I'm going to hit return. It's going to ask me for a password. And I'm going to hit return again. Now, when you first logged in, you're going to make sure that you have administrator access. If you don't, there'll be a yellow button where you can go in and click that and add administrator access before you run this yum update command. You'll see we're already up to date. So the next thing we want to do is do a couple of other pieces because we need some special tools to do what we're trying to accomplish. Now, number one, we're going to start editing a file. So we're going to have to create a mini script. We're going to have to download some files from a location so that we can get good data. And there's a couple of other pieces that we're going to need to add in here. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that I have a good way of editing files. Now, VI is built in, and if you're not familiar with VI, VI is a text editor that's actually very, very low functioning. So in other words, the text editor actually becomes part of the CLI instead of opening a completely different window like you would in a Windows environment. VI can be a little bit complicated. I like Vim because VIM because it gives us some color coding. It also makes some of our navigating in the file a little bit easier, those sort of things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install Vim. Now, if you got updates, and especially if there were updates to your kernel, you're going to want to redo a reboot. So if you did the sudo yum update here, and you got a lot of updates that came in, go ahead and reboot your machine. You can do that by type in sudo reboot, and the system will take a couple of seconds to come back up. So that's all you have to do. You'll reconnect, log in, and then you'll be back on the screen we're at once you go down to the terminal section. So I'm going to go back here and let's go ahead and install Vim. So I'm going to sudo install, yum install, and then I'm going to say vim. And that's going to install my editor for me. All right, it tells me it found the Vim that I was looking for. It tells me all the packages it's going to install. By doing that, I'm going to say yes, that I want to install it, and I'm going to hit enter. And this will download and install all the packages for Vim, and you'll see how we use that in a few seconds. Now, we also want to install a couple of other things. So I want to go in and also install wget. If you're not familiar with wget, what it does is allows us to go out onto a web page or website or anything that's web-based and download files or download pages. You can think of it as a text-based web browser. And the reason we need that is this is going to be how we download our PCAP files that we want to run in the background on our sensor so that we start getting traffic that looks more like your common traffic that you see in an industrial environment. So I'm going to say also sudo yum install wget. Again, it's going to tell us what packages. It looks like it's like getting the actual file, and it's also getting a library for us. So we're going to say yes. All right. So now we have the wget, and we get the vim for editing text files or any kind of files out there that we want, as long as they're not compiled. And the last thing I want to do is get a way to actually pretend that this network's going on, or all this transmission's going on in our network. So there is a tool that does that, and it's called TCP replay. So one of the things we want to do is go in and install that. So I'm going to hit the up, and I'm going to say install. I'm going to say TCP replay. Looks like it's only a single package. We're going to say yes, and I'm going to hit enter here. All right, so we should be all good to go. Let's clear this screen out so it'll make it a little bit easier to read. And so the first thing I want to do is just make sure that these tools are truly installed and they were run. So the first thing I want to do is just type in vim. And it looks like it is working. So to navigate in vim is a little bit different than most things that you're probably used to. To issue a command, you're going to hit the escape key. And then to tell you what the command key is going to be, you'll put a colon. And then you can do things like a Q, which stands for quit. So we're going to quit out of this. I just wanted to make sure that vim was working. All right, we want to do the same thing with wget, just to make sure that it's installed and working. That's good. We got a help page. And the final thing we want to do is TCP replay. And it looks like that's working, and it gives us some information on how to run it. Now I'm going to talk about each one of these and what they do. Vim's pretty straightforward, but we're going to start there. We're going to start under the section of vim. So I'm going to clear this one more time. And I want to see where I'm at. So in Linux, to find out where I'm at in a system, you can issue a command called pwd. That stands for present working directory. I'm going to hit return, and it's going to tell me I'm in the home admin directory. And that's good. That's where I want to be. I want to create a folder here for PCAPs, because one of the things that we can do is upload a file that's called a PCAP. PCAPs are basically captures of network traffic. So whenever you have a monitoring port, you can actually put something like Wireshark, or you can actually do like a TCP dump if you're doing command line, and it will track all that traffic on an interface, capture it, and put it in a file so that you can do analysis on it. Well, one of the things that you can do is actually replay that file. So from an organizational point of view, we want to make sure that we have that file in a single place. So I'm going to make a directory, and you can do that using the command make dir, and I'm going to call this PCAPs, and I'm going to hit return. Now if I can do an ls, that's going to list out what's in that directory, much like a dir does in Windows, and it'll tell me that now I have a folder called PCAPs. I'm going to change directory using the cd command to PCAPs. Excellent. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a pwd command, again, just to make sure I'm in home admin PCAPs. So this structure should be exactly the same for you. Now the next thing I want to do is download a file. And I'm going to put this link in the comments below, but we're going to say wget https://johnwally.com/downloads/ and I know that's a lot, but we're going to go to johnwally.com/downloads/ICS-traffic.zip, and this will download our file for us. So the first thing we want to do is hit return here, and you'll see that it goes through and downloads our file. All right, now we can do an ls again to see what's in our directory structure, and you will see that we have ICS traffic.zip. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say sudo, and I'm going to say yum install, and then I'm going to say unzip. We have an unzip file, so we're going to install unzip as well. And now we can unzip our file. So to move back up to the top, I'm going to clear or clean out our area. Now what we need to do is actually unzip the file. So I'm going to do an ls here, just so that I know what it is. I'm going to type unzip. Actually, before we even do that, let's talk about what unzip does. So I'm going to man unzip, and this may be self-explanatory, but one of the things that you can do in Linux is use the man command so that you can figure out exactly what you want to do. So if we want to unzip, we can go through here and we can say, how do you use the command? Are there any options? And then sometimes there'll even be examples in here on how to do that. So here's our examples. So to unzip and extract all members of the archive, letters.zip, into a current directory or subdirectory, creating subdirectories as necessary, I can just say unzip and whatever it is. So let's try that. So I'm going to hit Q to quit out of this, and I'm going to say unzip ICS, and I can hit tab here and hit enter. And you'll see what it's doing is it's inflating all these different PCAP files. Now, if you look, I'm going to do an ls here. And you'll see not only do I have my zip file, but I also have my ICS 1, 2, 3, and 4. Perfect. Now, the next thing I want to do, now that I have the files that I want and I have everything set up and I'm ready to play, now I want to create a script that will actually run these. This is where my Vim product comes in. So I can say Vim, and I'm going to call this something like trafficgen.sh. I'm going to hit enter, and it gives us a blank file. Now remember, there's all these indicators and controls on how we use VI. So to insert text, you're going to hit the letter I, and you'll see we'll go into insert mode. You'll see that down at the bottom of the screen. Now the next thing I want to do is actually tell our file that we're going to be executing what we want it to do and how we want it to run it. So the first thing we want to do is we want to say, okay, we're going to do a hashtag here, an exclamation point. We're going to do a /bin/sh, which means that we want to run a shell code for this script that we're creating. The next thing we want to do is run this command TCP replay that we installed. So we're going to say TCP replay, and then we want to tell it where to do it and how to do it. So we're going to do a -L 0-I for interface. We want it on NIC 1, remember, because that's where we're doing our monitoring. And then we're going to tell it what to play. So we're going to say we want to go in home /admin/pcaps/ and now I can say I want everything that ends in a PCAP file. And that's it. It's really that simple. So all we're telling it is to go through and replay all of our data that's coming through for each one of those PCAPs. So what it'll do is it'll go through that file and it'll start playing everything in order, and it will play each one of those. Now the other thing is we want it to loop. So that's what we added for the -L. We want it to loop through those files continuously. So we're always generating traffic. I'm going to hit escape. You'll see we left that insert mode, and now we get to give it to next area. I'm going to hit a colon. And you'll see down at the bottom where my cursor jumped down there, I'm going to say W for write or save. I'm going to say quit or Q to quit the file, and then I'm going to do an exclamation point. An exclamation is a point is something that says force it to happen, that I know what I'm doing. So you can do it with or without. It's habit for me to do from old days of putting it in place, and it's me telling the system I know what I'm doing, and it hits return. All right, now we should have 4, 5, 6 files in here. So I'm going to do an ls, and you're going to see now we have a traffic gen. Now traffic gen won't run on its own. And so if I do an ls with a long listing here, so we know what the attributes are, and you look, our traffic gen, if you look at our permissions on running this, it says that, the owner, myself, admin, I can read, write, that anybody in my group can only read, and that the average person or everybody on the system can't do anything with the file. So that's what those first letters mean at the very beginning of traffic gen. Well, we want to make sure we can run this file. That's important. So I'm going to change mod, and I'm going to change this to 744. Now, that's not going to make a lot of like if you're not familiar with Linux and knowing what that is, but that's basically saying as the administrator, I can read, write, or execute that file. But anybody in that group can only execute, and only anybody for the everybody group can execute this. So nobody's going to be allowed to actually just fully run this if they wanted to. We could even lock this down further if we wanted to. We could say something like, hey, they can read and execute here, and oh, by the way, the world can't do anything. And then so I'm going to say traffic gen sh, and I'm going to hit return. Now, if I do an ls-la for our listing, you'll notice now we can read, write, execute, or nothing for the whole world. All right, so now that we have our permissions, I cleared my screen here, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to test our script. So what we're going to do is a sudo command, and we'll talk about why we didn't put that in our script, because our script's actually going to be run as an elevated user, so we won't need this. So we're going to sudo, and then we're going to say TCP replay. We're going to do a -L for it to loop, a 0 for it to loop forever. It's going to go through these files forever and ever. We're going to do a -I for the interface, and we're going to tell it to do NIC1, which is our monitoring port that we set up on our sensor. And then we're going to tell it where the PCAP files are that we want it to play. So we're going to say home, admin, PCAPs, and then we're going to do a star to select all files.pcap so that it plays it. The next thing we want to do is if there's any errors in timing or like structure of the files, which you'll get in PCAP sometimes, we don't necessarily want to see all those errors. So I'm going to say to greater than /dev/null. So we're going to send any of those errors so we don't see it on the screen. I'm going to hit enter, and you'll see it's just going to stop there. You're not going to see any output that comes out because it's actually running in the back end. This command is. So as this is running, that's okay. I'm going to let this run a minute or so, or a few seconds, not even a minute. And then I'm going to hit Command and then C, or Control C. And you'll see as we went through, we saw all the packets that were sent as I was doing that. So we sent over 68,000 packets in that little bit of time. You'll see some of our errors where 4 of these packets failed. That's okay. All we're doing is making sure that we're able to generate traffic. That seems to be working fine, so we can move on to the next area, and we know that this command worked and should work in our script. All right, so then what we need to do is set it up so that the system will automatically run this. So how do we do that? Well, there's a command called crontab. And what we want to do is every single time the system reboots, one of the first things we want it to do is to start playing this PCAP file. That way, every time we reboot, it starts up and it generates traffic. Now, I will tell you, this is only for lab environments. You do not want to start generating traffic in non-lab environments. But in a lab environment, so that we have assets and inventory and events and all those things to work with, we want to generate some traffic out there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sudo, and you need to do the sudo because you remember our file needs sudo rights to run. So you don't want to run the command that I'm giving you as your local user admin. You actually want to run it as root. So that's why we're doing sudo as a first command. And then we're going to say cron tab -e for edit, and we're going to hit enter. And what you'll see is there's nothing in this file. So we're going to do one line, and it's going to be really easy. We're going to say we're going to say enter, or I for insert. Now that we're in insert mode, we're going to say @reboot. We want to run sh/home/admin/trafficgen.sh. So what this will do is every time this system reboots, it'll automatically run this script of home admin pcaps trafficgen.sh. So we're going to hit escape, we'll hit the colon, right, quit, you'll see down at the bottom, exclamation point, and enter. All right, so now we have a new cron job. So how do we know if it's working or not? So one of the things we can do is do a TCP dump. And I can say that I want to look at all the traffic on an interface NIC1. Now I'm going to do this now and show you the difference between now and when we reboot. So I'm going to hit enter. And we have to sudo here. And you'll see we have a little bit of traffic here, but it's not a lot. It's going back and forth, and it's local traffic, you'll see, that's just talking on our local machine. So all of our data here is just on the 10.2.9 network. So we're not seeing any traffic come out across here on any other network. So I'm going to hit Control-C here, and we're going to stop. And this is one way we can look at our traffic. So we're seeing stuff on 10.2.9.167, which is our host. We saw some back and forth to our gateway, but it's really only on the interface going back and forth between the host and the gateway on that monitoring point of all VLANs. Well, what we want to do is make sure we're seeing more than that. So what we're going to do is we're going to say sudo reboot. This will reboot our sensor. This will take about 60 seconds. It doesn't take long to reboot. And then we're going to come back and log in, and we're going to check the status of what we have again on that NIC1 interface. All right, it looks like we're up and running. I'm going to log back in. And I'm at my terminal. Now I'm going to rerun the same command we did last time, this TCP dump -i NIC, and I'm going to hit enter, and we're going to get a lot of traffic here, and that's all right. We just want to make sure what we're getting is what we think we're getting. Now we're seeing a lot more traffic now. And I want to draw your attention to some of the traffic that we're seeing. So even though we're on a 10.2.9 network, we're starting to see traffic on 100.102, right? 100.105. So this is because now our PCAP files are starting to run, and we're putting a lot more out there. A 10.30.39 is out there. So now that means that our file is actually running. You are generating traffic on your network. Good job. If you've made it this far, that's excellent. Now, we have to make a few other changes though. So now that we know we've set up this traffic, what we don't want to capture is our local area network. What we do want to capture is just what's coming across unmonitored. So I'm going to go over to my console for Tenable OT core. And I'm going to log in here, OT admin. And I'm going to make some changes because you'll see we have a lot of information off of my local area network that I don't necessarily want to track. So I'm going to go into my local settings, my environmental configuration, my asset settings, and remember when we set this up for our local network several episodes back? Now we're going to edit this. And what I'm going to edit this to is I'm going to say, hey, we want a 192.168.34.0/24, and I want a 10.100.0.0/16. Now, why would I change this here? Well, it's because I know these are the network ranges of the networks where we captured the actual PCAPs. So what I want to do is I don't want to pick up and track my local area network. I want to track my actual networks that have industrial control systems on them. So these are our two known addresses that we want. So here I'm going to hit save. So I'm going to change this network over and now make sure we start getting some clean data. Now we're set. We're ready. There's some more things that we'll end up doing in the future, but now I want to do one more cleanup. There's one more thing I want to do as I start getting this data. I want to go up to my sensors and I want to look at what I'm actually getting. So one of the things that we can do is make sure that we're getting actual data in through our sensors. And this is something a little new that you can actually start looking at. If I go to packet captures, I want to turn this on. And what you'll see is I'll have packet captures coming in on my local NIC 1, but I also have packet captures coming in on my Tenable OT sensor. Well, you want to keep this on because this is what allows you to go back and rebuild those events we were talking about and investigate. And we haven't turned them on because we weren't really worried about doing those packet captures. The second thing, while we're doing these packet captures, it'll start building out a file size as this collects. We want to go to conversations. And one of the things that we'll find in conversations when we have a lot of these 201 addresses, what we should start getting is some of those 10.100 addresses as well. Now this won't show up until we get through the entire capture. To give us an idea, I'm going to close ongoing captures right here just to see how much data we have so far. And you'll see that we've started capturing data for the local NIC. We still haven't got all the information in here for the other. So let's refresh and see what we have. All right. So it looks like we got from our sensor, we got in about 2.5 megabits of data that came in through the sensor. So if I go to conversations, one of the things that you'll start seeing is some of these other 10 networks. So if I say 10.100, we'll start seeing some of those addresses as well. So now we know that we're getting the data all the way that we created on NIC 1 down at our sensor all the way up into our core appliance. So our data should be getting cleaner. As one last thing that we're going to do that has some command line, I'm going to log into the Tenable OT core appliance and we're going to do a bit of a cleanup. Now that we know we have good data coming in, we're not collecting data from bad sources, we know that our configurations, at least initial configurations, are set for processing that data, I'm going to log in as my admin user. All right, now that we're logged in, we're going to go to a tools directory that we haven't talked about before. Now, if I do pwd, like we did before, we'll see we're in home admin. Now, this is on the OT core appliance. And what we want to do is look at how we can actually clean up the data from the back end. So if I change directories and I say home, Indige, remember this Indige user we talked about? I'm going to hit return and I'm going to do an ls or list what's in that directory. Now, one of the things that you'll see that's in this directory is this file for tools. So I'm going to change directories and go to tools. And there's a lot of extra tools that aren't necessarily in the interface. I'm going to do an ls And you're going to see there's a lot of them in here. And we'll eventually cover every one of these, or majority of these that are out there in our episodes. But for this one, the first thing we want to do is go in and do a system cleanup. So I'm going to go and say sudo /system-cleanup. And I'm going to hit enter here. It's going to ask me for a password. And it's going to ask you, do we want to remove all of our assets and events? And I'm going to say yes, because right now we're not really in a place where we're doing all of our true management of events and all of that. We just want to make sure we get a good foundation and that we have solid data that we know we can act on. So I'm going to say yes. And it's going to start running. This will take several minutes. And once it's done, it will disable the system. It means that we're going to have to go back into the main interface, log in, and re-enable. And one of the reasons it puts it in that state is if then, again, if you want to move stuff around, if you need to change it, if you're going to go this far through staging and then move it out into the plant. So it gives you that ability to choose when you want to enable it after we do the cleanup. So I'm going to let this run for a few minutes and then we'll be back. All right, and it looks like we're up and running. Now, some of those containers may be restarting for us, but we can go back to our core login and let's refresh and see if the system is up. All right, and you'll see we're at the system is disabled screen. All we're going to do is go in and click enable. While this is enabling, you should take note that when we clean the system up, it kept all of our settings. So now our inventory is clean. We have our endpoints in there. It's starting to track those. If I go to our inventory and all assets, what you'll notice is all those old IP addresses that were on the 10.9, guess what? They're all gone now. And the reason why is we said we don't want to monitor those anymore. We don't want to track those. We don't want those to count against our actual inventory. The other thing you'll notice is now we have this 10.100 network that's out there. And look at what we're seeing. They're Rockwell, Siemens, like Bachman as far as the back end. There's like VMware stuff, there's ABB. So now we're actually seeing real controller data that's out there that's going back and forth across these modules. You'll even see what's plugged on into individual backplanes. So now we're getting good data off of these PCAPs of what you would see in an industrial environment. All right, so I know this has been a pretty deep dive, a lot of command line today. If you have any questions or comments, I am more than happy to answer those and can even extend on some of these areas as we go through this series. I really appreciate you watching. Again, have a great day, and if I can help in any way, feel free to post. Take care.